Hey everybody, and welcome to Woodcrest Bonsai. On the 1st of March I did some air layers on my Hornbeam. So here's some of the crud that I've already taken off of this air layer here. And as you can see, it's rooted beautifully. Beautiful long roots. And I did an experiment where I took the cut where I wanted the roots to emerge from, and then I really took a tremendous amount of bark off, more than typically what people think. And this is the parent tree, and this is a pretty big tree. Eventually I want to turn this into a bonsai, but right now it's my stock plant. So the next process on here is to make sure those roots don't dry up, and then I'm going to cut it to here, and then also it's quite long going out there, and a poor chair. We won't go there. Now here's what the air layer looked like. So this air layer did not produce roots, and so I completely redid it. Can I get the sun? Can I shade the sun so we can see? So I used sphagnum moss. Actually, I used kind of a mix of moss and dirt. And then I wrapped it with white plastic, clear plastic, tight as I could. And then I wrapped it with this black plastic. And I'm also going to work on this one today. Basically, very gently remove the plastic and see if there is roots. If there is, I'll remove it. If not, put the plastic back on and hopefully continue. Sometimes I've had Hornbeam air layers that took a year. But this one was only done on the 1st of March of this year, and I mean, it's just, look at the roots there, just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So it's time to sever that guy and then pot him up. Okay, so I've got the air layer severed, and I just wanted to show you the sheer length of the branch that I also severed. So this thing is easily 7 or 8 feet long. And I cut off a whole bunch of seed, which, I wanted the air layer more than the seed. And the tree still has a tremendous amount of seed. And then here's my bald cypress dome. And then here's my mix. This is my homemade landscape mix. And I like these 2-gallon pots. So this is a 1-gallon pot right here. And this is a 3, which is typically what you buy your landscape plants in. But this is a 2, and I really like the 2-gallon to put my air layers in. There's a little more space, but it's a little more convenient as far as soil than rather doing a 3. And of course, eventually they're going to be bonsai, so I want them to go into a bulb pan at some point for more development. But for now, well, you'll see once I bring the air layer here, you'll see why I want to use a taller pot. So here's the air layer severed, and you can see I cut 2 branches off. And for now, I'm going to leave this the way it is. I may actually remove this entirely and bring the tree up into here. But for now, the most important thing is to get the air layer to survive. So, not sure how I'm going to pull this off because I'm right-handed. So I need to, how am I going to do this? I think I'm just going to have to put it on pause. I had a difficult time getting the plastic off of it, but look at the roots on this baby. Now that looks okay, but look at this side here. Just amazing. So I used a mixture of, God, why am I spacing out? Sphagnum moss and perlite and a little bit of dirt. And I do my air layers a little bit differently than a lot of people because I like to make them airtight. I just dunked this in water, so now it's soaking wet. So make the substrate that you're going to use very wet without being totally soaked, and then tie it together so tight that that water does not leak out or new water get in. I have found that if your air layering substrate is constantly getting dry and wet, that could inhibit root formation. So this worked absolutely beautifully. I mean, how could I not be happy about the results? And once again, this tree was growing. Of course, it was the other way. This tree was growing horizontally, so there are some roots on top, but all the roots are basically on the bottom because roots want to go down. Then we have this very strange little tuft of roots. And I'm a little reluctant to even mess with those. The air layer basically starts about right here. So this little tuft of roots is a little weird, there's no doubt about that. But I think I'm just going to leave it for now. Some people like to remove as much of the substrate as they can, but I don't do that. My philosophy is that keeping the roots from being damaged is far more important than getting rid of the old substrate. I can do that later. Once these roots, as you can see, they've been restricted by the plastic. Once these roots begin to move out into the ambient soil, then when I do a repotting, I can wash away some of that substrate and go from there. But for now, no attempt to even remove any of that substrate. Make sure the roots are super healthy. And man, they look fantastic. I am very happy about the results of this. And this was only 2.5 months. I did this air layer on the 1st of March. So now let's put it into the pot. So there we go. And also another reason I like 2-gallon pots is that the air layer went right to the bottom of the pot. I added a little bit of soil to start, and then I found the air layer was too high. So I put the air layer in the pot with no soil at all. So the air layer roots all the way to the bottom of the pot. But that ensures that the top of the air layer is under some soil. In fact, I may even add a little bit more soil. And then we have our weird little tuft of roots here, which I'm not even going to worry about. By far the most important roots are all those beautiful white ones that we saw when I took the plastic completely off. So now we have a tree, and already we have some reverse taper. So right here, it's not as thick as it is here. But I think I can rectify that by letting this guy grow. Letting this guy grow, get some more trunk thickness here. And at this point, that is inconsequential. I'm just so super happy that it rooted so beautifully. And I may go do the other one too. And it's a little bit of an ordeal to get that stuff out of there. I've got it zip tied, and then you got to cut it and unwrap and blah, blah, blah. So, you know, I don't think it's really necessary to actually video that. And it's interesting because I have 4 other Hornbeam air layers, and this one now is by far the thickest. You know, it could be. You notice the way I've angled it like this, as this is the main trunk. It could very well be that I could let this guy root and then angle it like this and then air layer this part, and that would eliminate the reverse taper immediately. I would go from here to here, and this could be a whole nother tree air layered. So that's another possibility. That won't happen until next winter, beginning of spring. Like I said, these were air layered. The 2 air layers that I showed you were added to the tree the 1st of March. So let's go see if we can't get the other one off of there, or at least just see what the status is of the roots. Like I said, that air layer I did once and it just didn't take it all. So I tried my new technique on that one too, where I took much, much more of the cambium off. So typically, you know, people take about like this much off. So you cut here, and then you take about that much off so that this is all bare in between. Well, I went like this, easily 3 times longer than you typically do. And it certainly seemed to work on this one. So I'm going to pause, go to the other one, and see what we've got going on. Okay, so this is just weird. The other air layer had no roots, although I must admit that the medium that I used was much more like soil. But I did get this little guy coming out of the top. It doesn't even have any green, but it does have some roots, and I dunked it in some water. So I'm going to put it into this pot, and I may have myself a Shohin Hornbeam. That's just insane. But no roots, so unfortunate. So 1 out of 2. What's that one song? 2 out of 3 ain't bad. So that air layer failed twice now, and the medium that I had around the trunk was just so different than the one that took beautifully. So it's definitely time to change my medium. In fact, I'll go show you what it looks like, but first I'm going to pot this guy up and get him started. So here's the media of the other air layer, and as you can see, it's just much muckier. It has some sphagnum, but it's a lot more dirt, and there is some perlite. But unfortunately, we got nothing, and I don't know why. Just except for that weird little sprout. So now the question is do I just bail? Because I basically just use this same knob thinking, well, the cells have already created the callus, which is where the roots come from. So I may just come up here. Get rid of the callus completely, and start it again. And this tree's been cut back a couple times, the branch, so it doesn't have really huge elongated branches. So once it's severed, I think it'll make a fairly decent tree a little more quickly, because it's already got some branching and some movement, but of course it needs to produce some roots first. A little frustrating. And so I'm going to end this video by showing you 4 other hornbeam, all air layers. Like I said, this tree produced seed like absolutely crazy this spring, but they still haven't matured. So here's a group right here. Can we see that? You know what, let me go with the sun at my back, and that will probably make things a whole lot easier. So here we go. There's some seed. And you can see they had the little samara, so it almost looks like a leaf. So the seed is at the very base, and then you have the samara, so that when they do mature and begin to fall off the tree, the wind will scatter them. That's basically the reason that samara's evolved. So here's a whole another bunch. There's one there, and there's one right there. So there's seed clusters on this tree all over the place. Here's another one right here. Lots and lots of seed. However, let me go show you the other 4. So here are my 4 other hornbeam air layers. And we have 2 in the back here. This one and this one, that are both the same age, and you can sort of see that the trunk is about the same thickness. These were removed from the tree 2 years ago, and they're growing beautifully, and I've really just sort of left them to grow. Then we have this one, which is much smaller, which was severed 1 year ago, and all this lower growth, I'm just going to let it all grow. Let them grow. Let them get vigor. Let the roots fill the pot. And I haven't, I'm looking at these guys with a preliminary eyeball saying, okay, so where do I go with this guy as far as a tree? But right now, I'm not even thinking about that. And then last but not least is this one, this little tiny guy, that was removed from the tree this spring. And it was removed after the tree produced seed. And so this air layer has at least 3 groups of seed. There's another group right here. And my head says, take off the seed and let the tree put the energy into growing sprouts. Because this sprout here and this sprout here are both brand new. So it has grown. But a tree can only do a certain amount with the energy that it's receiving. And once again, my head says, remove the seeds. My heart says, no, let them mature. So far, since I have had some new growth, since it was severed from the tree, the seeds stay. So I think the larger guys have the potential to be really beautiful trees, even this one here. It's going to take a few years. And hornbeams are not adapted to this area at all. Their natural range is about 100 miles north of here. That's the very southern tip of their natural range. So I'm pushing the envelope here, growing these guys at all, but they seem to be thriving. And as you can see, they're in dappled shade. You know, if we look up above, it's giant oak trees, lots and lots of shade, no full sun whatsoever during the day. And actually, as it gets to be more and more afternoon, the shade gets even denser. So there we go, hornbeams. One successful air layer with a huge amount of roots, but I used a much different mix that I think is where I'm going to go from now on. No more of that really muddy kind of soil mix. And I'm still going to try on that other air layer. I mean, why not, right? I usually use the baseball rule, right? And we all know what baseball, there's lots of rules in baseball, but the most important one, 3 strikes and you're out. So I've tried to air layer that sucker twice, so I'm going to give it one more try. And then since I've had such luck with the other one, and knowing the media that I used, I will use that same media. And next spring, once again, sometime middle of February, 1st of March, I'm going to air layer multiple sections of that tree. Take those off once they've rooted, and then begin to actually try to style the parent tree. Or else I'll be dead before I get around to doing that. I turned 69 in a month, so you know, if you wait another 10 years. So that's the plan, is next year air layer multiple places, maybe even 10 or more on that big tree. And then once those have rooted and been severed, then begin to actually work on styling the big tree. So that's it for this video. I'm really happy with the way these guys are growing. You can see the elongation of the branches. They're really doing well. And especially, once again, I'm 100 miles south of where they really should even be growing at all. So if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. If you haven't already, please subscribe and hit the notification bell, and I'll keep you informed on these and all the trees that I work on. And so there we go. I had 1 successful air layer and 1 unsuccessful air layer. Let's just call it that. So thank you so much for watching Woodcrest Bonsai.